and my dog agree.
What up, dog?
All right, we're going to take a little break here. I want to tell you about something pretty amazing that we stumbled upon. A little ways back, we interviewed this amazing dude, Kwame Bowen, and he shared with me after the episode that his mother is a poet. And what's awesome about that is that he has all of her writings and all her poems, but what he doesn't have is her reading them. That inspired Keith and I to then start recording videos for our daughters.
And as we started recording those videos, we started running into the challenges of where are we going to send them to our daughters? How are we going to get them to them? Where are we going to save them? Is it going to be Google Drive? Is it going to be OneDrive? And then along came GiftPod. It's an audio memory that you can record and give as a private podcast. What they're going to do is edit, add music, and produce the audio that you provide them into a professional podcast that you can share with your family members for any purpose. We use it for our daughters in the future.
All right, so check it out. In the write-up for this podcast, you're going to see a link to GiftPod. If you use promo code MIC10, you're going to get a discount. And leave some amazing memories for your friends, family, loved ones, maybe for yourself. Why don't you time capsule this for yourself? I don't know.
So check them out.
giveagiftpod.com.
MIC10 promo. Welcome back to More in Common Podcast. Today we're with CJ Johnson. So CJ, okay, I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm going to read all of his accomplishments in like one breath, maybe. We'll see. It's a challenge. Is an acclaimed speaker and digital marketing consultant, servicing Fortune 50 clients worldwide. And he's a prominent digital influencer with hundreds of thousands of online supporters. CJ is best known for creating successful influencer marketing campaigns as both an influencer and a consultant, helping content creators and companies maximize their ROI. As a successful influencer, CJ uses his voice for creative storytelling to provide inspiration, branding tips, and work-life balance advice in our modern era. As a consultant, CJ specializes in digital brand strategy, creative campaigns, influencer marketing, future of work, diversity and inclusion, and trend forecasting. His work specializes in the technology, fashion, lifestyle, political, travel, and entertainment industries. Now, CJ first found success as an award-winning creative director, producer, and writer, working on countless music videos, commercials, films, and television projects. And since then, he successfully co-founded one of the top 50 digital agencies in Los Angeles, became the on-demand branding guru of Silicon Beach, revolutionizing growth hacking, content creation, and influencer marketing, scaling marketing teams, and ambassador programs for on-demand apps. So, after finding much success, CJ evolved with the changing times, as we all should, showcasing his skills as a futurist and strategist, now serving as a GQ insider, Google Next Gen policy leader, and a branding consultant to innovative companies. Currently, CJ, if he's not doing enough, is based in Los Angeles, California, with his daughter Fiona, where they enjoy the ocean and father-daughter jam sessions. Welcome to the show. That is a mouthful, and I did not succeed in one breath. I don't know.
Welcome, man. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me, and I appreciate that bio rundown. We need to find a way to simplify that. CJ is an award-winning violinist, currently residing in Oceanside City.
There you
That's
go.
what it. We'll do that.
We'll do that. Thank you for providing it, though, because it makes it easy when I don't have to create the words.
It's fantastic too, because it answered one of my questions for you later, and you are a futurist. I was like, I feel like you're a futurist.
Yeah,
all right, so look,
absolutely.
I want to jump right in because you mentioned something in the lead up about being exhausted on the heels of you got COVID going on. We got Brianna, we got Aubrey, we got George, and countless others.
That's going to be my question too. Just so you have
brain
that for you, right?
Brain.
Yeah.
When you said that, you felt some exhaustion. Specifically, I mean,
I think all of us are feeling some exhaustion, but specifically as a black man, having people reach out, friends, coworkers, family, I very, very much identify with that. But I want to know what that meant. Like, what was that for you? What was that, or what is it? I don't know if has it gone away for you?
Sure. Yeah, no, it hasn't. It hasn't at all. Listen, there's something that, may not be getting discussed enough, which is there are so many different walks of life and different styles and perspectives of people. And one of the common conversations that we're hearing, doesn't matter what color you are, or where you're coming from, is that during this time, during the age of COVID, we all want to be in a better place after COVID-19. Now, the issue that happens with disenfranchised communities, and I'm just going to talk from the perspective of a black man, is that we don't get those opportunities on an equal playing field. So COVID-19 provided an equal playing field because so many of us are on social media because we mostly have mobile devices. Now, when Black Lives Matter emerged, every disenfranchised community was like, this is my time. Like this will be the time. Yes, I have to answer these questions, even if I don't want to answer these questions. Yes, I am incredibly tired. I'm tired just the same way you're tired. I have to go to work while also having to carry all of this emotional pain of seeing different members of my community being gunned down and have people and observe people having conflict about what that means to them. Never in a million years would I think that I would be a grown man discussing human rights as in my right. Like, I'm not talking about like some third world country. This is fucking America. I'm talking about like my right. Like me, a year ago, I'm a success story. Now I'm an endangered species. Of course I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I'm sleepy. I have amazing, amazing family and friends. And they're all different shades of the rainbow. And they all want to support. And I talked to my sister, and a homegirl was like, I don't even want to hear about this anymore. I'm tired. I talked to my mom, and she's like, you got to be careful what you say publicly. I talked to my ex-wife, who's white, and she's like, I want to go protest with you and Fiona. I got Fiona who's asking me genuine, profound, wise questions. Dad, I thought this whole thing with Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X years ago, I thought that they marched and all that stuff, so this wouldn't be a thing. It's still a thing? Why would anybody want to kill you? It's your dad. Sweetheart, I don't even know how to answer that. All I can tell you is that we have to do the best that we can with what we have, how we can, and some people will not like you for absolutely no reason at all. And some people need help, and they don't even know they need help. Some people need love and patience, and they don't even know they need it. And we just have to give it to them. And we have to make sure that we stand tall, we walk tall, and we keep it moving. So I had to find ways, as this dude who makes a living talking about productivity and work-life balance and emotional intelligence and well-being, I had to find new ways to be healthy because it was a lot. Here I am, a single dad. Sometimes I get lonely, and now, people won't leave me the fuck alone because they're checking in on me. Jesus Christ, thank God, for fucking fantasy football and sports coming back and basketball playoffs. Cause I'm just, when a white person, no offense to shout out to white people. When white people were like, I'm so tired of this conversation. Yeah. And then you hear a black person immediately be like, so are we. I think that there needs to be acknowledgement that not only am I exhausted about having this conversation, I don't want to have this conversation at all. Like, my father had that conversation. My grandfather had that conversation. My great grandfather. I'm a descendant of slaves, and I'm doing it the right way. and I'm still an endangered species. So if I'm doing it the right way, quote unquote, and that's not enough, like it's still a topic of conversation, I'm beyond exhausted. I'm angry. I'm jaded. I'm tired. Depression is high. Depression is depression doesn't even look the same as it might to you. It might look incredibly different from me. What's my value? If you're telling me, if I'm questioning my value to you, I'm having to explain something to you about why I don't want to be racially profiled and how that might be an issue, how I don't like microaggressions. What's a microaggression? A microaggression is me even having to explain what I'm explaining. Why am I explaining anything to you? Let's talk about fucking football, man. And let's talk about some real shit.
You like football, like basketball, Let's talk about the things that matter, right? You said, absolutely. I mean, in this exhaustion, the exhaustion of being checked in on. So this is something Rodney and I talk about as far as like allyship and all that, right? How you're in tech, we're in tech. A lot of white people, not a lot of black people, relatively speaking. So it's statistically speaking, relative to other industries, but it's definitely not a lot. A lot of white people will reach out to the black person that they know. What's that experience like for you?
Shitty. Sorry, I answered for
me. No, shit. Rodney's right. It's exhausting. I mean, look, it's people that have good intentions and they're coming from a place of love and respect. There's no hate against that. That's not what when you hear people say they're exhausted and with check-ins, it's not because of that. It's because of, again, we're having these conversations about me feeling dehumanized. And
they don't actually, and you feel unhuman in the conversation. Like I have to explain how I feel about not feeling human.
Correct.
It actually perpetuates
for me? It perpetuates it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And by the way, depending on the relationship that we have, that puts a lot of things in perspective. First of all, we have an overall culture of overthinking and overanalyzing because so much information is being thrown at us, and there's so many distractions being thrown at us in the first place. So, for example, one of my ex-girlfriends, she's white, she lives in New York, and she was telling me during all of this. First of all, she's going ham. She's going ham even more than some of my sisters and brothers are about pro Black Lives Matter. Even though we've never had that conversation. In the history of us dating, we never had conversations about race, or equality, because our relationship was just based, I was a human being to her. She saw me as CJ and I saw her as who she is. And it was so interesting because all of a sudden, she's like, how are you? And I just, and I had to have a long conversation with my father and my mother about these things. And it was bizarre as fuck to me because I literally was like, we dated for a hot second. I didn't know that there was even a topic of conversation of them having an issue with me, and it made me replay different moments of my life and put things through a different lens. So that exhaustion is actually very mental. It's just mental. It's tough as it is to wake up and go do your thing. Imagine waking up, doing your thing, and then everybody is looking at you with I don't want to say anything wrong and walking on eggshells and shit. It's okay, you're obviously walking on eggshells. Stop. I'm walking on eggshells, and I got to do my work.
Yeah,
and my personal life.
It's also a little bit physical from a time perspective, which I guess time's not physical, but it's if I have a question about white people, I got 800 to 1,000 people I can call.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people I'm the only black person.
Very true.
And I
Very
got
true.
I had to stop responding.
Yeah.
I had to stop responding to people, like even on our team. Like I just had to stop responding because I didn't have time to tell them that I didn't
Correct.
feel like talking to them.
This is
Yeah.
a nuance of this conversation when we like, and I bring it up specifically because we haven't talked about it much on the show. And like I talked to Rodney and some other friends and like fairly aware of this situation. And it's just something that I don't think enough people are realizing. Like, and then the question is, well, how do I do it? Well, you don't need to do it as a token, right? Like,
Correct.
if you haven't talked to that person in a personal way for the last 6 months that you've worked with them, and now all of a sudden, like, you're really concerned about them, like, understand that there's a lot of other people probably doing that too, and just slow down. Your ego doesn't need that checkbox, right? So it's
absolutely,
you know,
and I think one thing that you said, you know, that's very important to know is that like checking in with somebody is just checking in with somebody. It doesn't need to be. There's something that I do that I shared with some of my friends. They got kind of mad at me about this, but I have a list of people that like are priorities to me. That like I do take out time to check in on people. This is something that I implemented when we talk about life hacks. It was a life hack that I implemented of like, okay, I'm gonna make a list of like the top, you know, when they say you're a reflection of the top 5 people in your everyday life, and you're right. And then also top 20, you know, who are those people that like I rock with, that I have to make sure that I check in on, that I have to make sure. So, you know, there shouldn't be like a color equation to that. Right. You know, it should be very simple of like who brings joy to your life, not conflict.
If they're on your list going into an event like this, check in on them. If they're not on your list, like someone else hopefully will check in on them. Right?
Well, I think, are you going to get to what a check-in looks like as well? Because like, I think there's a way to check in that's like, Keith, you kind of alluded to this. Are you checking in for you or are you checking in for them? And I think a lot of the people that reach out to me wanted to assuage their ego. Like, oh, well, I know a Black person and I checked on them. So like, I'm good.
I feel better.
Absolutely. So you both said something that I have to talk about real quick, and that is ego. Like the first of all, ego isn't real, right? So like that is like a manifestation of the reflection of our culture, right? So if ego isn't really supposed to play a large role in our deciding factors of how we live our lives, but because of social media, it now people mix the two. People mix that philosophy of the ego. The ego is totally the enemy. I'm sure you guys are the type of guys that read that type of literature. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Stoicism.
I haven't read it yet. We just talked about it yesterday. Yeah. Yes. I saw you reading a book in your social media. I thought it was a Stoic book.
Well, yeah. I mean, I practice Stoicism. And look, the reason why I say that is because that is the issue. Like, it's not sexism, racism, it's ego. Ego, the ego of I am better than you. And because of social media, it's increased, right? Because now subconsciously, even consciously, we like, man, I'm not comparing myself to anybody. Subconsciously, you are. You can't help it because if you're right. Like, and imagine you being like a day, like a bad day. Like, I'm tired. I don't feel good. I don't look good. Everybody's driving me a little crazy. And then you scroll through your Instagram and one of your friends, or maybe a frenemy, whatever, is having the time of their fucking life in Cabo. You can't help but be like,
it's human.
Man,
I want to be in Cabo.
I want to be in Cabo. And that person is showing you that.
Yeah.
So they can massage their ego as well. So when we talk about race and we talk about check-ins and we talk about these sort of philosophies, you know, that plays a large role in this. You know, nobody, a white man in an authoritative position puts his knee on somebody's neck. Maybe that has nothing to do with racism. It has everything to do with that man feeling a type of way to release his masculinity. That's ego. And the impact that makes on me, well, depending on my emotional wounds, because each and every one of us comes from different emotional wounds, I may see that from a different perspective. Same thing when you're doing check-ins. Great ways to do check-ins is
before we go check-ins, can we go back real quick? I just want to go into that just for a sec. So
Absolutely.
ego being so it sounds like you're saying that ego is a construct of culture, which is very much permeated by social media, perpetuated by social media. I knew it was a P word. And so the ego, there's this piece of self, but much of it's being taken from what others are telling us it should be, or the comparisons of us versus others. And
absolutely, it's playing a larger role in the way of all dynamics. This isn't just a race thing. This is even like when we talk about love and relationships, and you know, the comparison of like parenting. You know, I'm parenting. My parenting style is better than your parenting style. You should parent this way. You should be single for a little bit. No, you should date right away. Like all of that shit is like ego based. Mm-hmm. And it's becoming an increasing part of our lives because we're mixing the two. The two are not the same.
So a misalignment to my ego is what creates the environment or the ecosystem that then perpetuates racism or sexism.
I mean, you take the racism component of it and the backlash of the conversation. Mm-hmm. That is very much an ego-driven backlash. It's to say, I'm not racist, therefore racism doesn't exist. And because if it does exist, or white privilege is a really good example, well, I worked really, really hard for what I have. Therefore, if I worked hard and white privilege exists, maybe I didn't work hard, or that narrative that I had told myself.
It diminishes my ego.
Absolutely.
And thus racism's not a problem. And it's like, well, both things are true, right? Like we can have that conversation and you can still be a hard worker and still have benefited from privilege because you just live in America, right? Like that very fundamental aspect. You weren't born in the middle of a slum in India. Like as a woman, like you're done, right? Like your entire life trajectory is very different than being born a white male in America. Like it's just a fact.
Absolutely.
Right?
Listen, the worst thing you can do to someone is to destroy their perception of reality.
Yes.
Because what you're doing, and that's the reason why this is so difficult for so many people from all sorts of different situations, because basically we're coming from these different perspectives of our emotional wounds, right? You got your perspective, you got your perspective.
Are you a fan of the Enneagram as you say that?
Of what?
Do you know, are you familiar with the Enneagram?
Yeah.
You say emotional wounds.
I wouldn't say that I'm a fan. I'm acknowledging that each and every one of us
you acknowledge its underlying premise.
Absolutely. And also understanding that, like, especially social media plays such a critical role in all of this, that now we're able to really tunnel vision our reality. So it's like the equivalent of, like, you know, popping a balloon. You know, it's your life, and it's just floating, and you're like doing your thing, and then somebody comes along and just pops it, and you're still a balloon, but now everything has been shredded. We like to play the victim a lot. This person did this to me, and therefore because they did this to me, it impacted me this way. So that lack of ownership and authority over our own spirit and our lives, even that plays a role in how we perceive things and how we respond. You know, listen, if I were to tell, like, my white ex-girlfriend, there's plenty of them, but if I were to say, like, yeah, you used to do microaggressions. If somebody were to come up to them and be like, yo, you're racist. And her response would be like, how could I possibly be fucking racist?
I dated a black guy.
This is the love of my life. That doesn't mean shit, honestly. It doesn't. And you acknowledging that, and you acknowledging, well, maybe, that is so disruptive. It unravels your entire reality.
Your idea of who you are or what is true.
All of it.
Or
your identity is different. Your philosophies are different. It almost feels like it's a form of gaslighting. That's why people are so resistant to you, to the other side of a conversation. And in reality, you know, and I think, and this is just from my own perspective, I think you just find this out with like life experience. Like it's always shades of gray. Some things are open-ended that you just won't understand and figure out. Some things you will. Like we all have to create some sort of narrative of like how something works for us to feel comfortable and calm. That's also one of the reasons why anxiety is such a big fucking deal right now, because all we see are contradictions in every aspect of our lives. You know, 1 minute, you know, if I drink soy milk with my fucking coffee, I'm healthy. The next minute it's oat milk. You know, if I decide to be a vegetarian, I should actually be a vegan. If I decide I don't want to be either of those things, you know, and I just want to eat meat and not be told what the fuck I eat, like, well, you still have to pay attention to your diet. It's just like, wow, Jesus Christ, like that's a lot.
Can I just live?
There's
Soy
so much
estrogenic and it causes cancer.
Yeah.
What? I thought it was healthy.
Yeah.
There's so much information. There's this constant disruption to stability that it's like I just want to. I mean, I talked to. Don't want to identify this person, but a friend, and
you know who you are.
Yeah.
You know who you are.
His sentiment, it's like, I get why athletes are protesting and using their platform. I get it, but I just want to watch sports, right? And it's that right there. It's like I just want normalcy, and ultimately we all do. And we're in this cultural circumstance to try to find at the end of the day that normalcy is different for all of us, and we should accept everybody's normalcy as long as it doesn't infringe upon other people's normalcy. And until our systems provide for that, then this shit's going to keep going because people can't get out of their own egos.
Well said.
It's when people get violent about keeping their sense of normalcy at the cost of other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally.
There's so many contradictions. I mean, I love you know, I love what I do for a living, and I love my lifestyle because I'm always able to have these conversations like this on a daily basis and see how people don't understand that they're perpetuating the very thing that they're getting upset about. It's so insane. And when you break it, like I said, when you break it down for people, you know, I used to be, you know, one of those people that's like, listen, let me problem solve this shit for you because this is what I do for a living.
Let me.
You're the fucking problem. You want to know what the commonality is? You. So shape up or ship out. But I do like 80% of my life is like women are involved, so I can't talk like that. So I've learned the art of listening, and being very respectful and really guiding the conversations in a way of like self-awareness. Self-awareness is so huge and painful, but it's a necessity.
An example of that, because I want to know if you experience this. It is self-awareness being painful. Successful Black man doing well. It's not awesome being a Black man in this country or the world for that matter, as we talk about it being not awesome to be Black in, I don't know, like Latino communities. But then it's that dichotomy. Like I'm doing all right. I've been fortunate enough to be around some people that are helping me. So my acknowledging my privilege inside of the microcosm of still having issues. It's like, damn, like that fucks with me.
Yeah. Really?
It does.
Why does that fuck with you?
Because some days I'm just like, man, it sucks. And then other days I'm like, yeah, but you're good. And so I'm having this conversation with myself, and that just, and then the outlet is usually like, all right, so what am I going to do about it? And then that's where I am like, oh, well, I can use the privilege that I have to help others who don't have it. And that's where I find some solace. But there are days
Mhm.
where it's just like, damn, that's just like a mind fuck.
You know, I think that's really interesting because I hear that from everybody. Like I hear that from a 26-year-old white girl in Brooklyn. I hear that from a black man that's like in his 50s in Atlanta, Georgia. I hear so much of that, and I think that that's because of a little bit of like what we're talking about. When you're finding success and you clearly see some people are struggling, you can't help but have a little bit of guilt. And depending on where you're coming from and how hard you work. And one of the things that I always say to myself and I say to other people is like, accept your journey for what it is, and accept that like one you should be so lucky and privileged and appreciative and joyful of life that you're able to do the things that you're able to do right now. And what you just said that you articulated so well is that don't use guilt as like as the lead in. Just understand that, like, ask yourself real questions like, why am I here? Like, what is the contribution that I can make to my community? Hey, look, I do just like want to watch sports and not talk about politics, but what am I doing to help the conversation? Like, what's one thing that I can do today to help the conversation? Not make it complex. I'm a successful black man. Should I flex or should I downplay that? Well, if
Depends
I
on the room I'm
downplay
in.
that, depends on the room I'm in. And by the way, if I downplay that, then I'm only perpetuating a stereotype that there isn't successful black men that look like me. When I flex, that shows you what a powerful black man looks like. So for me, I prefer the flex. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not humble. It just means that, like, yes, I am going to get a fucking latte at Blue Bottle, and there's nothing fucking wrong with that because I earned it. And by the way, I used to sleep in a fucking car while I was an intern at MTV Series Development and holding down a job at 24 Hour Fitness.
Okay, so let's
So
go
I've done all that.
So let's get into it because there's this
yeah.
dichotomy. You just said something that's two things. One, accepting your journey, and I've identified this as my number one problem: accepting my success. And like that's the harder part. I can accept failure. It's my success that's harder. You just talked about sleeping in a car, so I want to talk about your journey. Like,
Humble beginnings.
Like, like what you also alluded, I'm sorry, Rodney, but you also alluded to your father and you wanted to be a better man than him, right? And like, where does this energy and self-awareness
and acceptance of your journey come from?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know which question you want me to add. Like that's
whichever one you want to, because we're throwing it all out there because we don't have a ton of time with you today, and we want to get to know you a little bit more.
I'll give you an extra 10 minutes. I'll give you an extra 10 minutes with me because this is a great conversation. People need to know what we're talking about and discussing. So first of all, humble beginnings. I don't even want to say humble beginnings. I have had that journey of what's the worst that could happen? I saw what that's look like. What that's look like. What's the best that can happen? I've also seen what that looks like from a personal standpoint and from a professional standpoint. So a lot of times when I'm going into these conversations with anyone, I just have like such a nuanced perspective of things. When I was a college kid, first of all, I live in Los Angeles. It's super expensive to live out here. My family is military. My father is in the U.S. Army, retired now.
Shape up and ship out. I thought I heard that. I was like, there's some military. Yeah,
totally military. So I lived all around the world. But my household was very strict. My parents had me when they were young and when they were in college. So they were like young 20-somethings figuring out how to be parents. And my dad was like a total frat dude. So there was all sorts of like dysfunction going on. And they tried to do their best. I was a very intellectual kid. And we just lived all around the world. Like to experience all these different cultures. So we ended up living in the Marshall Islands. on this island called Kwajalein. So if you were to look this up on Google, it's KWAJ.
We'll put this in the show notes for sure.
Yeah. Well, listen, this is why this is wild. It's 3 miles long, 1 mile wide. It is where we test the missiles defense for our country.
Huh.
So I graduated with a class of 25 kids, and then I moved to Los Angeles, one of the biggest metropolitan cities in the world. And I had no friends out here. I got a bunch of grants and scholarships. I really was not very good with money management. I was like totally living like a college lifestyle. Los Angeles is considered one of the loneliest cities in the world, and that is because it is, yes, it's very difficult to find friends in a community in Los Angeles because it's so spread out and it's so niche.
That makes sense. I get that.
So as a Black kid coming out here, you know, it took me a while to find my rhythm. But yes, I was, you know, none of my friends, I went to art school, Art Institute of California, Los Angeles. All of my friends were from Los Angeles, and most of them didn't do student housing. So that experience of student housing was actually living in the apartment complexes that they rented out rooms for us. So for me, I was very eager to live on my own. And anyway, I was like a Black Zach Morris from if you guys are familiar with Saved by the Bell.
Yes.
Yep. So I was.
Did you date Tiffany?
I did, and Lark and Elizabeth. I dated all of them
Jesse,
at this point.
Yeah.
I had a little bit of everything at this point. But the reason why I say that is that like I was really like a big prankster, like hustler, entrepreneur, and very charming. So I would always be in trouble. And the question would always come up, you know, this is plays in our conversation. The question would always come up is like, am I getting racially profiled, or is it just because I'm, you know, I'm a bit of an asshole. Like I can't tell here.
Did I heard this or not?
Yeah, did I hear this or not? And at one point in time, you know, I was like homeless. I was living in a car next to the beach, couch surfing for like almost 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And while I was in college, and I still, you know, graduated with honors. I was at MTV Series Development as an intern. I was recruited out of college to work as a video editor at Mattel Toys. And yeah, there was like all sorts of like interesting things that happened from that journey. My dad was very, very successful. He's a leader in the community. But you know, he wasn't like the best dad to me. I have a sister, 10-year difference. He's father of the year for her. A lot of the shit that like I experienced. Yeah, it was just the complete opposite. So that was always an interesting dichotomy. I'm my own man now, but growing up is a very interesting dichotomy. Why? Because I got to see what it looks like when people change. I also got to see what it looks like when people save and invest their money. I also got what it looked like when people were coming from humble beginnings and like became well off later in life. So whenever people would tell me, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that, it's like, you haven't even heard my story. This is not, by the way, I am so about being in the present. I try not to think too much about the future, and the past has already been written. It's already happened. That doesn't define me. So a lot of times people think, they're like, man, you're just some bougie Black dude, like who just has it all together. Like, you know, and your family looks very nice and well off. Like so that's where you come from. And it's like, no, that was all earned. All of that was earned. All of that came with pain, sweat, and tears. So when people say, oh, well, you're an entrepreneur, you're doing all these amazing things. Man, dude, when I was like 21 years old, I was working at a Fortune 500 company. I was in a cubicle. I was working a corporate job. I do know what that's like to do that. And I hated it. I hated it so much. I hated it so much that I would try to quit. And this was the most interesting thing about me being at Mattel Toys. It was during the time of the digital revolution. So I was the person that created the digital library for Mattel Toys. And I did that at 21 years old. And I was being groomed by the VP of this, the CEO, Bob Eckert, who was at the time was considered one of the best CEOs in America. And I don't talk about this at all. Nobody would ever know that. I tried to quit several times because I hated it. I came out here to be a filmmaker and an artist. And every time I quit, I had a black boss. And he was like, I'm not going to let you quit because, yeah, benefits. This is a very high paid job. And he's like, what can we, and also you're doing all these things. What can we do to keep you here? I was like, I don't want to work on Fridays anymore. And he's like, done. And then he got fired. He got laid off. I think that was around 2010. So the 2008, 2010 was around the
how long were you at Mattel? Like at this point?
5 years.
5 years.
5 years. Okay.
So I was there at Mattel for 5 years. The economy went to shit.
Yeah.
And he got fired. My entire team got fired, and I was the only person there. I tried to quit.
So you want to quit, and everybody else gets fired. Isn't that a bitch?
Yeah, and no joke, I was like, I don't want to work on Mondays anymore. So they're like, fine. My pay never got impacted. And then after a while, they're just like, okay, who the fuck is CJ, and why does he make this amount of money, but he only comes in 3 days a week?
Yeah.
What the fuck's going on?
Yeah.
And so I was able to not work on Fridays for like 15 years. I worked that into every agreement of a job since then. And that's like a part of my lifestyle now.
So you've said I don't tell this story. It's actually one of the, I think, principal components of what we care about, because I mean, we talked about this earlier in the week, but this idea, like you talk about everything, you mentioned things like Black Lives Matter, and you mentioned police violence, and we mentioned all of these charged topics for a lot of people. And you're a super successful Black dude with a daughter, and you dress well and you look good. And so you are all of these things that I think of you. So then when you say these things, and I'm not saying me personally, just the universal eye, when you say these things, I immediately think of, oh, you're something. So I'm going to make a whole bunch of assumptions about where you come from and who you are. And like you said, we all come from a different background. So like, I appreciate you sharing all of that stuff because we think it's super important. It paints the story of your life. So that it's like now when we talk about these things, all of a sudden, everything that you say comes from a totally different context and perspective. And it's like, oh man. And
the art of listening and asking questions.
It is a remarkable thing.
Hey, speaking of, you made a little like a little shrug at you're successful.
Yeah, you did.
How does TJ define success?
I define success as living your life on your own terms and making an impact in your community, living a joyful life with your loved ones. I've studied too much, gone through too much to understand that by the end of my life's journey, the things that are going to matter the most are love, family, friendship, moments of peace and serenity. Success in professional terms is so subjective. So I shrug because, what is success? In
that's why the question, back to your social media comment.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people get their success criteria is exactly what you said. It's my friends in Cabo, I'm not successful. On and on and on and on. I want to ask,
just real quick, like,
just
because this came up the other day with us, and for me in particular, like if I look at my entire life as it is right now from the outside, people would be like, that dude's successful. But I don't feel it, to your point about joy. Like there are things that I have so much joy. And you talk about that corporate arch where it's like those 5 years man, it's a grind and it is not where I want to be. And eliminating those components of our lives to find joy in what we do, that I'm totally with you. And not there yet, but there's so much joy in my life now that, you know, I see more success as a result of it. So, I mean, I love the way you put that there.
So thinking about present a little bit, digital marketing, influencing, and at the same time, you talk about the effects of social media. How are you? And we talked a little bit about the new documentary on Netflix earlier this week.
Social Dilemma. Yeah.
Which is on my next. I have not watched it yet, but it's on my next. But since you brought it up, like 5 people brought it up. Like everybody, articles, everybody's bringing it up.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like either as take this how you will, either as a result of watching that or just prior to that, like how do you think about balancing how you show up on social media, who you are, how people perceive that, and also the things that you have goals, you have things you're trying to accomplish. How do you try to balance it? Do you just try to show up as you? Like how do you go about that?
Yeah, so real quick, that documentary is because you haven't seen it yet. That documentary has like zero impact on my life. The topics addressed in that documentary is actually what I do for a living for the past 8 years. So it's relevant in the context of, see, all of the things I was telling you guys about, now you're just seeing it on a Netflix show, and you don't even realize that Netflix is also like a part of the problem as well. You know, you're at the end of the day, you're the product, and you've always been the product. So when people say, how does this company make money? They make money off of your information and your influence and your data. And now it's just becoming even more fine-tuned, because they can say, I want you, or I want you, and they know exactly what they need to do. So yes, I do find balance in that. That's one of the biggest things that I try to talk a lot about, is finding balance in what this looks like. There's different components of how I've looked at it over time, and there's different components of how I try to talk to people of how they should look at it. One, if you are very happy and successful in what you do for a living and your family, it should just be seen as like a photo album. Like you shouldn't be trying to do anything. Like you should just literally be like, you know, oh yeah, Instagram, whatever. It should not play a large role in your life. If you are in this entrepreneurial journey, this like, I would love to be a content creator, I would love to be an influencer, different ball game, right? Because it's either fake it till you make it, or it's a highlight reel, or it's by design. But it is absolutely not, what's the word? Not chaotic, spontaneous. It's not spontaneous. It's all by design. So it's all intentional. So if it looks like it's not, it actually is. It's all by design. Like, you know, a girl still tosses her hair, you know, puts her jacket on sideways, takes a photo, and like does a 20 of those shots before you see that final one that's like, oh my God, I wish I could just look like that if I just like got out of bed. When you see me, you know, my friends are so funny because they're like, look at Mr. fucking GQ. Like, you always have like a fucking photographer with you. Yes, I do. It's a part of my fucking job. Yes.
This is what I do.
Like, I do. Yes.
Could I sum up would it be fair or accurate to sum up number 1 by saying, know the game you're playing?
Yeah. You know, and I only say this depending on who I'm talking to, because again, I try not to like throw my own belief system on people, but like I do see the game of life like chess. So what I mean by that is like every move that I make, I try to be conscious of what the 2 moves will look like down the line. That's how I play the role as a trend forecaster and a futurist. it is not me thinking about all the anxiety of X, Y, and Z. It's me being like, okay, if I make this decision, what's the impact of that? So I'm always looking for what massive action can I do that plays a large impact. And as you have more experiences, you're really able to understand that the decisions that you make always has a domino effect, and it's a matter of like, okay, well, what are the little things that I'm doing that are habitual? What are the little things that I'm doing to add to my lifestyle to make my life be what I envision for myself? Like, all of that is by design, all of that is a plan. You don't necessarily have to know it in the beginning, because I think that trips a lot of people up. But what you should do is you should ask yourself, like, what is the why? Like, what is the purpose of this? And a lot of times, you might find that, like, oh shit, like what I ask myself now? I ask myself, is this serving my ego or is it serving my purpose? So if I take a shirtless photo of me and I put it on Instagram, am I doing that because I'm trying to lay a thirst trap for somebody, or am I doing that because it's moving the conversation forward? Well, what conversation am I moving forward, right? So that for me is like a chess move. It's like, if I don't do that, I don't have to do anything at all, or I can do something completely different, right?
I just asked myself that question this morning about voiceover. So Rodney's into voiceover, and I think it's interesting. I think it would be a cool hobby to pick up.
Yeah.
And I started reading this book that Rodney had recommended to me, and I was thinking, am I going to be able to invest all of my energy into this in the way that the people who wrote this book do? And I said to myself, no, that's not going to happen. So then why am I doing it? Right? Like, if I can't do that, is it moving the needle? And what needle is it moving? And it turns out the answer on that for me is, it'd be an interesting hobby. And it's as simple as that, right? Like, if I were able to do something with it, it would be passing, and it would be passive, and it wouldn't be this life goal or achievement. And in that, I probably won't do any of it. But the practice of it and all of that would just be fun, and it would be a hobby. And ultimately, to your point, like, the first thing that came to me was, I'm doing this. My first thought is, this is just ego driven. And it's like, okay, if it is ego driven, cool. Like, to your example, if I want to take a shirtless photo, maybe I just don't need to put it on the internet, right? Like, I'll go serve the ego, and then I'll move on.
I think even when you say that, it ties a lot of what we were discussing before into this very interesting thing of, like, now, see, this is the problem. Now, when you do a hobby, you don't just do it to make yourself feel good. You do it because it may be profitable.
Yeah.
Like you just said that.
Yeah.
And it's a fucking hobby.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be something that, like, you do out of joy.
Right.
And it's interesting that that's where we are. Like, okay, so here's a couple of things. One, we don't praise intellectualism like we used to.
No.
So me reading a book is me being smart. Me taking the knowledge that I learned from that book and applying it to my life. That's the whole purpose, right? Or if I'm reading something that's a narrative, it's supposed to calm me down. Like, it's self-soothing. And then when you talk about what that looks like now in social media, it just plays such an interesting role. As soon as you said passive, you're like, oh, it doesn't have to be passive. That fucking comment, that conversation of, like, if you can profit from that, that's a brand new thing, man. That's not something that, like, you always used to say to yourself.
No, a hobby.
Yeah,
it's a hobby.
It can just be a hobby.
It can just be a hobby. Yeah,
it's a hobby.
And you just said that, like, social, like, what it's kind of social and this culture shift, like, we're kind of missing the point. Like, and you had talked about this as well earlier, reflection, taking time to reflect. Like it is known scientifically that if you learn a thing or you read a thing or somebody speaks to you for an hour, you're going to keep maybe 20% of that if the coming days you don't reflect upon it to make it knowledge that is yours, that you can then apply and turn into wisdom. And it seems like it is making it cool to be like, I just read The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. I don't know what it said,
Right.
but I read it.
Yeah.
Like,
And interestingly enough, first of all, I would love, just because I love life hacks. I'm writing a book. Make sure the art of asking questions is so huge because you learn so much about everything. Asking questions, reflection, putting in action, and then the final step of a 4-step process that I created is turn that action into a habit. That is how you find success. So when you're able to define what you want your lifestyle to look like, what you want the world to look like for you, those are the steps that I found have bring you the most success. So The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. I just real quick, I talked to the author, Mark Manson, and I'm like, I have to ask Mark because Mark is very interesting because, Mark, he said something that for whatever reason, it like kind of stuck with me. He says so many profound things, but he said something about like how he always thought surfing culture was dope. And one day he was like, I'm going to become a fucking surfer because like I've had this visualization and this dream of being a surfer. And then he did it and he hated it. And he's like, oh, I just like the idea of being a surfer. And that just alludes to what you were saying about the hobby. So I asked him this question. I say, hey, Mark, what's the number one question you get asked often? Like what, out of all the questions that you get asked, what's the number one question? And he said, the number one question I get asked about is relationships. And am I loved? Does this person love me? He said that love is like the number one thing that he gets asked about.
I think I know.
And I think he said that he thinks it has a lot to do with people trying to process heartbreak and understanding their value. And, I'm interested to know what your take is on that. But I think that's really interesting that like, we as men talk a lot about success. We talk about professional takes on things, but when we don't talk enough about, mental health. We don't talk enough about like love and kindness. When you see what a woman looks like now, and she's very successful on her own terms, and some men are not able to accept that, and that like some women are like, man, men are really needy. Like they just need a cheerleader. And that's
see me when I'm sick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I dig in on one thing? Because I think it's really important, and we have 9 minutes of your time. So thank you for the extra 10. And we have one other question. So you said men don't talk about mental health enough, and I totally agree. And it's a big pivot. You said earlier when we were talking about being exhausted, you said you needed to find new ways to be healthy. And you've gone through a lot of stuff, being homeless, having a rough relationship with your dad, living on a very, very small island. So I'm sure going to LA, like there's a lot of stuff that you've mentally processed in your life.
Yeah.
This
Divorce. One of my best friends died in a hiking accident. My digital marketing agency, that was with my ex-girlfriend where we broke up.
That's fun.
That was devastating because it was very public.
Yeah.
So I got to see what that looks like when you have like a cute little Instagram couple breaking up.
Yeah.
It was very grimy. Yeah, for sure.
So what are some of these new ways that you've had to navigate to manage your mental health?
Well, it's different for everyone. For me, I love reading. I love art. I love all these things, but it became such a part of my habitual routine that I had to like start to think outside of the box. So, I don't know. I'm still figuring that out, to be completely honest with you, because, the joy of certain things has shifted. I even curating music playlists is like a bit of a hobby for me.
Passive hobby? I'm just kidding.
Passive hobby.
Don't you ask me about my hobby. I want to like what you just did was super dope. And like it's so subtle, but like you just acknowledge that you don't have an answer. Yeah. And like especially you're in a profession of talking about like getting shit done and solving shit. And you're like, I don't know, I'm figuring it out. Like I think men don't do that a lot. I think people don't do that a lot. We're like,
Right.
no, I know what to do for that, and it's like,
Yeah.
that was just dope. I just want to thank you for that moment.
I appreciate you saying that. I don't like to bullshit people. I like to be very honest. I like to be very humble, and sometimes I got to pull back on some things. You know, I could easily be like, "Well, guys, this is what you should do if you're."
Here's my four-step plan.
Listen. Let me tell you something. And you said this before, and then you slightly mentioned this before when we talk about success. You know, everybody talks about the tough journey of failure, like keep on going, and one day you're going to find success. So for me, I found success pretty early. Like I told you, I was recruited out of college. I didn't have to look for employment, and it was a very well-paying job. Like I had benefits and everything, like right out of the gate. Every time I tried to quit, I got what I wanted out of it. I found a lot of success early. So when I started finding failure, it was like, oh shit, like that shit was hard. But the reason why I say that is it is difficult to manage your lifestyle when you found success. And people don't talk about that a lot. It's the reason why you see a wealthy, successful, famous person have mental issues. And you're like, how the fuck did they have mental issues? It's like there comes a new level of pressure because you're not under the radar. You're very much the radar. You know, when we talk about Facebook in the beginning was anti, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now they are the system. They're the very system that they were anti in the beginning. They are that system now. That always happens when you find success. And what does that look like? Because it does change the dichotomy of your relationships personally and professionally. There are some friends that I love to death that they feel intimidated having conversations with me. They feel like they have something to prove to me. I do not. And that push and pull sometimes can be very uneven. So when I talk about finding new ways of self-soothing, finding new ways to relax, finding new ways to be productive, it is very much me trying to explore things outside of the norm and outside of my, outside of the box. Like I would love to start diving into things that I'm just not very knowledgeable about. Like, and that's very risky and that's very hard. You know, I love entrepreneur. Like that's one of the, when we were saying earlier, like that's one of the reasons why I'm deep diving into technology. I've always been a technologist. I've always been interested in technology, but I've always come at technology from the perspective of social and on demand and stuff like that. Those are territories that I'm familiar with. Well, what about these other territories that I'm not so familiar with? Motion capture, product based. You know, how is this playing into your everyday life with different sort of systems? And that's become an increasingly interesting hobby. I've also taken on being much more conscious about my intake. So I say this a lot to people. I have a very diverse intake. So what that means is that I do acknowledge, you know, if I were to use this in a political perspective, I have right wing and left wing people that follow me on social. Socially speaking, 67% of my audience is white. So they're learning a lot of these things that we're discussing through me, through the art of like my creativity and conversation. But I love biographies. I love learning about different world leaders. I love storytelling and learning so many interesting things. I think one of the most interesting stories that I learned this year was about Warren Buffett, that I know all of these things about how he's awesome and he's this great trend forecaster. I had no idea why he became a philanthropist, being interested in philanthropy. Jesus Christ. I got to stop drinking so much coffee in the morning. That's part of my morning routine, fellas.
Hey, mine too.
But you know, the story of his first wife that like died, and she was the person that was a huge activist, a civil rights activist, and she was literally like, you know, what are we going to do with all this money that you're obsessed with? Are we going to give it back to the community? And he's like, one day. And then one day she's like, yo, I'm out of here. You keep obsessing about this, I'm going to live my life. And all of their kids followed in her footsteps. and when she was dying on her deathbed, went to her side, making her promises on her deathbed, and then she died. And that's literally when he decided it's time to give away my fortune.
I did not know.
People don't even talk about that. People talk about how he's a shark when it comes to stocks and all this stuff, and his relationship with Bill Gates. And those are the reason why that's so important is because as men specifically, we don't acknowledge those things, or critics, where we're like, oh, he's just giving away his money, and like he's doing that because, and if people were to know the reason behind that, they would be like, oh my God, like shit, some of these people are fucking human. Some of these people, do believe in like love and respect and like contribution to the community.
Like,
Bill,
ask questions, get to know someone before you judge the behavior, thoughts, and ideas that they have, right?
We have to take out the time, even though that's difficult with time management, but we have to set aside time in our day, whether it be 15 minutes, 30 minutes. Come on, we can find 15 minutes to learn something new, ask questions, do a deep dive on something. The way we absorb information, here we are like, it only took me this amount of time to do this. But, you can't even find the time to learn something new that's outside of your will box. Like, that's too much fucking work for you. Come on, let's get real.
Speaking of, you gave us 10 extra minutes, and I really appreciate it. Like, it's been a really good conversation, and I'm thinking about a lot right now, like a whole lot. And I really appreciate you. We got one more question.
And we're at time.
So that we can be, so we can
respectful.
honor that extra time.
Let's do it. Thank you, everybody that's listening and watching at home. This is the reason why we're here.
This is why we're here. What do you want to leave the audience with?
What do I want to leave the audience with? I hope that people that are watching. Yeah, I mean, it's. I hope that if you're watching and listening to this conversation, I hope. I would love for somebody to walk away and feel a little bit extra inspired to do something more with their life, rather that be from a professional perspective, rather that be from a personal perspective. If you're a man listening to this, I hope that, you're learning that like, this is what like a normal conversation, a healthy conversation looks like. People from different perspectives listening to one another, bouncing ideas off of each other, engagement, having a conversation. If you're not a man, I hope that there's some helpful, inspirational tips. The only reason why I say the man thing is because there's just three dudes talking. So, but despite what color you are, yeah, man, for sure. Despite what color you are, your background, understand that like every moment is yours for the taking. You can make that switch to whatever you want to do in your life at a moment's notice. Your past has already happened, and it has nothing to do with what's happening right now in the present, and your future has not been written. So if you are interested in making a difference, go make that difference right now. If you are interested in living the best life you've ever lived in your entire life, go do that right now. If you are interested in chasing your dreams, or you are acknowledging that you're living your dreams, take that moment to yourself and acknowledge it. So that's what I'd like to leave you with. Also, make sure you take good care of your hygiene. Brush your teeth, wash behind your ears. God bless. Good night.